You know, there are some stories that stay with you long after you hear them. Stories that make you question everything you thought you knew about love, about marriage, about what really happens behind closed doors when the cameras stop rolling and the congregation goes home. This is one of those stories. They called her Mummy G.O. You know what that means if you've ever stepped foot in a Nigerian church. General Overseer's wife. Untouchable, unreachable, perfect in every way that mattered to everyone watching. Her name was Ifeoma, and she was married to Pastor Ben of Restoration Glory Ministry in Port Harcourt. 15 years of marriage, 2 beautiful children, a ministry that had grown from 50 souls in a rented classroom to 5,000 members in their own magnificent building. From the outside, they had everything: success, respect, the favor of God, as they say. But here's what nobody saw coming. One Sunday morning, after Pastor Ben had just finished preaching a powerful sermon titled Forgiveness in Marriage, a sermon that had the entire congregation on their feet, shouting hallelujah, crying tears of breakthrough, Ifeoma went home, packed a single bag, and walked out of her marriage. Just like that. And if you're someone who loves stories about the hidden struggles behind perfect facades, about what happens when silence becomes too heavy to carry, then you absolutely need to subscribe right now. Because what I'm about to tell you will change everything you think you know about church marriages, about perfection, and about the courage it takes to choose yourself when everyone expects you to disappear. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Picture this. Every Sunday morning, without fail, there she was. Ifeoma would glide into that front pew like she was floating on air. Her gale was always wrapped to perfection. Her lace fabric cost more than most people's monthly salary. And that smile, oh, that smile never seemed to waver. Not once. The women in the church studied her like she was a textbook. They watched how she walked, how she carried herself, how she responded to her husband's sermons with those perfectly timed amens and gentle nods that seemed to come from somewhere deep in her spirit. They wanted to be her. Who wouldn't? She had the life everyone dreamed of. But you know what they say. The higher the pedestal, the harder the fall. Behind that church building, in their 4-bedroom duplex, with the imported marble floors and the furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine, Ifeoma was slowly disappearing. Not physically, no, she was still there, still breathing, still going through all the right motions. But the woman she used to be? She was fading away, piece by piece, day by day, like a photograph left too long in the sun. See, Pastor Ben wasn't always like this. When they first got married 15 years ago, he was completely different. He was Benjamin then, not Pastor Ben. He would pray with her, not just about her during church services. He would ask for her opinion on everything. What color to paint their first tiny apartment, what to name their children, how to handle difficult church members, what dreams God was placing in their hearts. They were partners. They were a team. They were in love. But success has a way of changing people, doesn't it? Sometimes so gradually you don't even notice until you wake up one day and realize you're living with a stranger. The church grew from 50 members to 500, then to 2,000, then to 5,000. The miracles started happening. People were getting healed. Marriages were being restored. Financial breakthroughs were flowing like rivers. The television broadcasts began. The invitations to speak at conferences across West Africa started pouring in. And slowly, gradually, without either of them really noticing at first, Ifeoma went from being his wife to being his accessory. Ifeoma, make sure you wear the blue dress for the conference tomorrow. It photographs better under the lights. Ifeoma, sit here during the board meeting, but don't speak unless I specifically ask you to contribute something. Ifeoma, the visiting pastor's wife, wants to talk to you about submission in marriage. Share your testimony with her. Her testimony, as if her life had become nothing more than a packaged story to be sold to other struggling wives who needed to hear how wonderful it was to be married to a man of God. And their children, oh, their children. 14-year-old Chidi was acting out in school, getting into fights, talking back to teachers. 10-year-old Adana had started having nightmares, waking up crying in the middle of the night, asking why Daddy never had time to help with her homework anymore. When Ifeoma tried to talk to Ben about it, tried to tell him that their children needed their father, not just their pastor, he would wave her away like she was bothering him with trivialities. I'm doing the work of God, woman. These children need to understand that Daddy has a calling. Why do you always have something to complain about? The work of God. That phrase became the wall between them. Every conversation that mattered, every attempt to connect, every cry for attention was met with those same 5 words. I'm doing the work of God. As if God's work didn't include being present for his own family. But here's the thing about church life that nobody talks about. The expectations. Oh, the expectations. The church expected Ifeoma to be quiet, modest, always smiling, always supportive, never having a bad day, never struggling with anything that couldn't be solved with more prayer and more faith. When she felt lonely, they told her to intercede. When she felt ignored, they told her to fast. When she felt like she was drowning in silence, they told her to praise through the pain. She became an expert at spiritualizing her suffering. Every hurt became a test of faith. Every lonely night became an opportunity to seek God's face. Every argument with Ben became spiritual warfare that required more intercession. But Ifeoma was tired, bone deep, soul-crushing tired. Tired of being told to pray about things that could be solved with a simple conversation. Tired of being expected to smile through pain that was eating her alive from the inside. Tired of praying for a man who had stopped seeing her as anything more than a supporting character in his own story. Her husband was kind to everyone, patient with the church members who called at all hours, gentle with the youth who came to him for counseling, understanding with the couples who needed marriage advice. Everyone except her. With her, he had become cold, distant, like she was supposed to be grateful for whatever scraps of attention he threw her way between more important kingdom business. And then came that Tuesday evening that changed everything. She was cleaning his office in their home, something she did every week without being asked, just another one of those invisible acts of service that kept their life running smoothly. His phone was charging on the desk, and when it buzzed with a message, she glanced at it automatically. It was from Sister Joy, one of the young women who worked in the church's media department. Beautiful, single, always eager to help Pastor Ben with everything, from organizing his schedule to preparing his sermon notes. The message was simple. Pastor, thank you for the beautiful flowers. They brighten my day, just like your words brighten my heart. God bless you for always knowing exactly what I need. Flowers. He had sent flowers to Sister Joy. Ifeoma stared at that message for a long time. Not because she was angry about potential adultery. No, it wasn't that kind of betrayal. It was something deeper, something that cut to the very core of who she thought she was in his life. When was the last time Ben had bought her flowers? When was the last time he had noticed that she needed encouragement. When was the last time he had paid attention to anything she needed? She scrolled up through their conversation history. Messages about church events, meeting reminders, thank you notes for his spiritual covering and fatherly guidance. And underneath all the spiritual language, there was something else. Something that felt too familiar, too intimate, too much like the kind of attention she hadn't received from her own husband in years. He wasn't cheating with his body, but he was giving away pieces of his heart that belonged to her. That night, she lay in bed next to him, listening to him breathe peacefully, while her mind raced through 15 years of marriage. When had they stopped talking about their dreams? When had they stopped praying together? When had she become so invisible that he could give another woman the kind of thoughtful attention she desperately craved? She didn't shout. She didn't confront him. She didn't demand explanations or start a fight. She just decided. The next morning, while Ben was at his early morning prayer meeting, Ifeoma called her cousin Ngozi in Enugu. Her voice was calm, steady, like she was asking about the weather. Ngozi, I need to come stay with you for a while. Ifeoma, what's wrong? Are you okay? There was a long pause. Then in a voice that was barely above a whisper, no, but I will be. She packed one small bag, just the essentials, some clothes, her Bible, her journal, a few photographs of her children. She left behind the expensive jewelry, the designer clothes, the symbols of status that had become her prison uniform. She wrote a note and left it on his pillow. Ben, I have been trying to talk to you for 3 years. I have been trying to reach you through prayers, through conversations, through silence, through everything I know how to do. I am not leaving because I don't love you. I am leaving because I have forgotten how to love myself. I will be in touch about the children. Ifeoma. And then she walked out of the only life she had known for 15 years. Just like that, she left behind the title of First Lady. She left behind the respect and admiration of 5,000 church members. She left behind the security of being married to one of Port Harcourt's most influential pastors. For the first time in years, she chose herself. The church was in shock. I mean, complete and utter shock. First ladies don't just leave. They endure. They pray through. They stand by their man no matter what. That's what they're supposed to do. The rumors started flying immediately. She must have backslidden. You know how spiritual warfare targets pastors' wives. Maybe she was jealous of Pastor Ben's calling. Some women can't handle being married to a man of God. It's definitely a spiritual attack. The enemy is trying to destroy the ministry. But here's what nobody understood. Only 2 people really knew the truth of what had happened in that marriage. Ifeoma and God. And God wasn't talking. Meanwhile, in Enugu, something beautiful was happening. For the first time in years, Ifeoma was remembering who she was before she became Mummy G.O. She started seeing a therapist, a Christian counselor who understood the unique pressures of church life, but wasn't afraid to call emotional neglect what it was, even when it was dressed up in spiritual language. She began journaling again, not about prayer requests and church events, but about her own thoughts, her own dreams, her own relationship with God that had nothing to do with being anyone's wife. She reconnected with old friends who knew her as Ifeoma, not as Pastor Ben's wife. She took long walks. She read books that had nothing to do with being a better wife or a more submissive woman. She started painting again, something she hadn't done since before she got married. And slowly, she began to remember what her own voice sounded like when it wasn't filtered through someone else's expectations. But back in Port Harcourt, Pastor Ben was falling apart. Not publicly, of course. Publicly, he was still the powerful man of God, still preaching with authority, still calling forth miracles, still quoting scriptures about restoration and God's faithfulness. But privately, he was unraveling like a cheap sweater. Her silence was louder than any argument they had ever had. Her absence screamed at him in ways her presence never could. The house felt different, empty, like all the life had been sucked out of it. He tried to maintain his routine, early morning prayers, scripture reading, sermon preparation, church services. But everything felt mechanical, lifeless, like he was going through the motions of being a pastor while forgetting how to be a human being. And then, about a month after she left, he did something he hadn't done in years. He went into her side of their bedroom closet. Her clothes were still there, hanging exactly as she had left them. Her journals were stacked neatly on the shelf. Letters she had written but never sent. Notes she had taken during his sermons. Back when she still hoped his words might eventually reach her too. He picked up one of the journals, feeling like he was violating something sacred. But he needed to understand. He needed to know what had gone so wrong that his wife, had walked away from everything they had built together. The first entry he read was from 2 years ago. I tried to talk to Ben about Chidi's behavior today. He said he was too busy preparing for the crusade and that I should handle it myself. Sometimes I feel like I'm raising these children alone. I know he's doing important work, but aren't we important too? Another entry from 6 months ago. I saw Sister Joy bringing Ben his lunch again today. She was laughing at something he said, and he looked happy, relaxed. When was the last time he looked at me like that? When was the last time I made him laugh? I feel like I've become a stranger in my own marriage. And then, the entry that broke him completely from just 2 weeks before she left. I don't think Ben sees me anymore. I'm not sure he even knows I'm struggling. Yesterday I cried during worship, and he didn't notice. I could disappear tomorrow, and I don't think his life would change at all. God, I don't know how much more of this silence I can carry. I feel like I'm drowning in plain sight. Ben read every single journal, every note, every unsent letter where she had poured out her heart to the husband who had stopped listening years ago. And for the first time in years, Pastor Ben, not the powerful man of God, not the conference speaker, not the miracle worker, but just Ben, wept. He wept for the woman who had tried so hard to reach him that she had exhausted herself in the process. He wept for the conversations he had been too busy to have. He wept for the moments he had missed, the pain he had ignored, the silence he had mistaken for contentment. He wept because he realized that while he had been busy being a pastor to everyone else, he had forgotten how to be a husband to the one person who needed him most. But you know what the hardest part was? Realizing that she hadn't left because she was weak. She had left because she was strong. Strong enough to choose her own well-being when everyone expected her to sacrifice it forever. Strong enough to walk away from security in search of something more valuable, her own dignity. 3 months passed. 3 months of Ben trying to figure out how to fix something he had spent years breaking. 3 months of realizing that all his pastoral counseling skills meant nothing when it came to understanding his own wife's heart. And then, one Thursday morning, he did something that shocked everyone who knew him. He bought a plane ticket to Enugu, not as Pastor Ben, the powerful man of God who always had the answers, just as Ben, the man who had lost the most important person in his life, because he had forgotten how to love her. He didn't bring flowers. He didn't bring expensive gifts. He didn't come with a prepared speech full of scriptures and promises. He came with something much more powerful. He came with repentance. When he knocked on Ngozi's door, Ifeoma was the one who answered. She looked different, peaceful, like the weight of the world had been lifted off her shoulders. Her eyes were clearer. Her smile was real, not the practiced one she had worn for years. And Ben did something he hadn't done in longer than he could remember. He knelt down right there on the doorstep, in front of his wife, and he spoke from his heart instead of from his head. Ifeoma, I didn't come here to convince you to come back. I came here to tell you that you were right to leave. I didn't cheat with my body, but I cheated your heart. I gave away attention that belonged to you. I treated you like an employee instead of my partner. I made you invisible in your own marriage. His voice broke. I abused your silence. I ignored your soul. I took your strength for granted and called it virtue. I made you small so I could feel big, and I am so sorry. He looked up at her, tears streaming down his face. I don't want you to come back to be Pastor Ben's wife. I want you to come back so I can learn how to be Ifeoma's husband. Not as a pastor, as a man who lost the most precious thing in his life because he forgot to treasure it. Ifeoma stood there for a long moment, looking at this man she had loved for 15 years, seeing him clearly for the first time in forever. Not as the powerful pastor, not as the man everyone expected her to submit to, but as Ben, just Ben, broken, humble, real. I need time, she said quietly. And I need you to prove that this isn't just words. I need to see that you understand what broke us and that you're willing to do the work to rebuild it. And you know what? He did the work. They started marriage counseling, not church counseling, where the pastor's marriage had to be presented as perfect but real honest therapy, where they could finally say the things they had been too afraid or too proud to say for years. Ben stepped back from some of his church responsibilities. He started saying no to speaking engagements. He began prioritizing his family in ways that were visible and consistent. He learned to listen without immediately trying to fix or spiritualize everything. He learned to see Ifeoma as a whole person with her own dreams and struggles, not just as his support system. And slowly, they began to rebuild something that was stronger than what they had before, because it was built on truth instead of pretense. 6 months later, Ifeoma came back to Port Harcourt. But she didn't come back to the church first. She came back to him, to their marriage, to the family they were learning how to be again. The congregation was overjoyed, of course. They saw it as a testimony of God's restoration power. And maybe it was. But it was also a testimony to what happens when two people are brave enough to choose truth over image, healing over hiding, and love over the appearance of perfection. Ifeoma never went back to being the silent, smiling first lady who never had an opinion or a struggle. She became something much more powerful, a woman who had learned to use her voice, and a wife who refused to disappear for anyone's comfort. And Ben? Ben learned that being a powerful man of God means nothing if you're not first a present man at home. He learned that titles don't protect people from emotional neglect. He learned that sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is admit you've been wrong and do the hard work to make it right. Their story spread through the church community like wildfire, not as a cautionary tale, but as a hope story. A story that said even the most broken relationships can be rebuilt when both people are willing to do the work. But here's what I want you to remember from Ifeoma's story. Some women don't leave because they're weak. They leave because they've tried everything else. They've prayed, they've fasted, they've submitted, they've sacrificed. They've made themselves smaller and smaller until there's almost nothing left. And sometimes choosing yourself isn't selfish. Sometimes it's the most courageous thing you can do. Sometimes the person who walks away is the only one brave enough to say that love shouldn't require you to disappear. And sometimes walking away is the only thing that can wake someone up to what they're about to lose forever. Restoration doesn't start with more prayers or more submission or more trying harder. Restoration starts with truth, with honesty, with the courage to say that something is broken and the commitment to do whatever it takes to fix it. If this story moved you, if it made you think differently about marriage, about church, about what real love looks like when nobody's watching, then I need you to do something for me right now. Hit that like button, because stories like this need to be heard. Share this video with someone who needs to know they're not alone in their struggle. And subscribe for more real, raw stories about the courage it takes to choose truth over pretense. Because in a world full of perfect facades and filtered lives, we need more stories about real people making real choices to fight for real love. And sometimes that fight starts with walking away. What's your story? Let me know in the comments below.